Hello everybody, I'm Jill McCracken. I'm a Regional Inspector with the Sports Ground Safety Authority and I'm here today at Edgbaston Stadium to talk to Figen Murray. This is Figen's story.
My name is Figen Murray. I'm the mother of Martin Het. Martin was one of our 5 children who very sadly was one of the 22 victims at the Manchester Arena bomb attack in May 2017. So I'm also the instigator of Martin's Law, which is something I feel quite strongly about. So the first year after Martin died, we didn't really do very much. I certainly couldn't even function as a human being, if I'm honest. But some of my children bought my husband some concert tickets for a singer he likes, and that was a Father's Day gift in June that year. And the concert wasn't until December, and I remember that night getting ready to go out for this event and thought, well, I'll get my tiniest handbag to make the bag search easy. So all I needed really was a packet of tissues and my phone. So I took a small handbag and off we went. And when we got to the venue, my husband got his tickets out and I was ready for the bag search, and we walked in and staff looked at us and then looked away and carried on chatting. And my husband looked at the tickets and said, oh, our seats are upstairs. We walked up the stairs and sat down. So I was shocked at that, to be honest, because I thought 18 months prior to this concert, 22 people lost their lives. How could it be after 18 months that people seem to have forgotten what happened and just carried on as if nothing ever went wrong, and nobody had learned anything from it. So I was shocked, and it felt like the 22 people who died didn't count. It just simply didn't matter that they're dead, and that deeply upset me. So during the concert I started to cry, and my husband Stuart noticed, and he whispered, "It's the songs, isn't it?" And I whispered back saying, "I'm not even listening to the concert." And he whispered, "Well, why are you crying then?" And I whispered, "Because nobody searched my bag." So that December, I actually, it was really, I was simply chewing heavily on this, and it really preoccupied me. So in the December, I researched security at venues. So you need to remember, I knew nothing about terrorism or security. But I was really preoccupied with security during December. So I decided to research security on the internet and came across, I wanted to know how venues keep people secure. And somehow I stumbled across the government's contest document. And there it was in black and white that security at venues is only a recommendation, it is not mandatory. And I found that completely shocking, especially bearing in mind that big venues like a stadia or arenas, that there are laws on how many fire exits there have to be, how many toilets there have to be, how hot the food has to be. Yet there is absolutely no legislation about security and keeping customers and also staff safe. So I could not believe that. So Christmas and New Year came and went, and then in the New Year I decided to set up a petition. I didn't go the change.org route, I went the government petition route. Those petitions last 6 months, and I went that route because I wanted the government's support right from the word go. So halfway through the petition, there were a few things that happened that were quite curious. So my petition, with lots and lots of prompting on social media, crawled up to, at the end, to about 23,500 signatures. Actually, halfway through it, 2 other petitions emerged on the same site and overtook me within 2-3 weeks by the hundreds of thousands. One of those was Bring Back the Jeremy Kyle Show, and the other one was Bring Back Plastic Straws for McDonald's. Obviously the general public had very big trouble sucking up a milkshake through a paper straw, and nobody seems to have had the intelligence to literally just take the lid off and drink it. But there you go, that's what we're up against. But nobody really cared about security. And I kind of get it, because before Martin died, I would have been exactly the same. Security wouldn't have been on my mind at all. It isn't on most people's minds. But that is why Martin's Law is so important, because I feel venues have a real responsibility to keep their customers and their staff safe from terrorism and other major incidences. So the message I have for larger venues, arenas, stadia, is that actually please don't be complacent. It is really important you don't treat matches, events as routine because you're so used to them. Treat each one of them in their own right as a terrorism risk. Please don't think this will never happen here. I am sure that the people in Manchester didn't expect that a terrorist attack would happen at a children's concert. Neither would they have expected it to happen the week before that fatal attack, where it was simply take that, and the crowd was full of middle-aged women who wouldn't really pose a threat. So please don't think it can't happen here, or it's not important enough for anybody to attack the venue. So each time you have an event, please brief your staff afresh, keep the briefing interesting, involve people by asking questions to make sure you check their understanding of the briefing. It's all those kinds of things that everybody is absolutely on top of their game. And that's really, really important. So the attack really has damaged the fabric of our family. I often refer to life as before Martin and after Martin. And it literally is, we are kind of broken as a family, not destroyed. Thankfully, we are a strong family. But not all other families from the arena attack are, because, you know, what a terrorist attack does to families is it rips a family member out of your family with such a violent force that, because of the nature of these attacks, that it makes it very difficult to comprehend and come to terms with it. And actually, you know, as a family, we have all changed, all of us, and whilst we function completely on a different level. I lost my job since Martin died. The same day Martin died, my job died alongside it. One of my daughters was meant to go to university in the September. She couldn't go, she was psychologically too affected. You know, it just literally tore us apart. It was just horrendous. But, you know, that happens not just to us, it happened to all the other families, it happens at every terrorist attack. So these attacks really need to be taken very seriously.
Figen, thank you so much for joining us at Edgbaston Cricket Ground today, and your opening address to the group here, it was just, I mean, it's just mesmerising. I've heard you speak before, but that was very, very sobering, and it really highlights why we're here today. This is a conference all about safety and security, so thank you so much for your time today. A couple of the things that you talked about that I made some notes on as you were talking, and it's something that's been in our safety and security world, we hear it a lot. It's that whole thing around complacency, people getting just complacent, treating an event as just another event, and not just paying that little bit of detail to it. So I was really interested to see only 18 months after you didn't even get your bag searched properly.
Yeah, I think it's really important that anybody who works at an arena or a stadium or any job where they look after lots and lots of people, that they should treat the job as just another day at work or at the office, because each event can pose different risks, and each event needs to have a different type of briefing, and the briefings are really so important that they're kept fresh and current, and that they're varied so that people don't switch off in their head as they listen to yet another briefing. So at the moment there is a massive shortage of security people. COVID obviously had a big impact on the numbers of staff available. A lot of people were laid off or lost their jobs because of COVID and have gone to other jobs. So it's really important to recruit people into the industry and I feel also get younger people into the industry and offer it as a really valuable career option because we need young people because they have a different skill set, but they're actually also, coming into the industry with fresh energy. And if you give them a proper progression route within the company also to actually maybe become supervisors or go into management, then that'll be really a way of bringing more people into the industry as a whole. But obviously that has to be reflected in the salaries.
Sure. And have you heard amongst, I know you've spoken, we were chatting earlier, I know you've spoken, we know at least 80 times because you have a super fan that we know has heard you speak about 80 times. But have you come up against any resistance in the form of people perhaps saying this is just going to be too expensive and people are going to go out of business because of it? Have you come across that?
Absolutely. When I very first started the petition on my own at the very early days, in the first month really, I was heavily criticised that I'm going to make venues bankrupt, I'll close small businesses down because of the legislation, it's too expensive, people can't afford it. And I thought, well, how much value do you put on a human life? Because you cannot pay for a human life that's lost, because no amount of money would justify or make you feel better about it.
So we've talked a lot about the impact of the Act coming into force. What do you think the industry itself, so if we take the venues out of it and we talk about staff and people in that roles and people who are responsible for delivering that safety and security strategy and plan, what can they do?
There's so much that can be done. Okay, the legislation is going to take a while, but there's loads of stuff people can already do. So first of all, training, the essence of everything is training, good training. There's obviously the free of charge ACT e-learning training, there's SCAN training. All of that can be found on the Protect UK website. There is also an app any staff can download, so they have it on their fingertips. Loads of information, lots of training. But actually, it is really important that staff are told to have the awareness and the absolute attention to detail and observational skills that they have. They need to use them not just during concerts or sports events, they need to use them in between, because there's always these bad people who come to the venue and do reconnaissance, they come here and check the venue out. So, pay attention to what people look like and if they keep coming back.
Are you seeing an improvement? There's been so much publicity rightly about this campaign.
Yeah.
Do you think it's filtering through now?
Slowly. So I hear, obviously, people communicate with me a lot about, I've been to this concert and that event and security was great, security was not so great. But actually, it is really important that people are not necessarily waiting for the legislation to come through, that they're actually starting to educate their staff to get the awareness, and not just for the staff, but also that they get that awareness over to the customers, because I think it's a joint effort. I think we have now come to a stage in society where terrorism isn't just the responsibility of the police, the government, counter-terrorism, or people who work at venues. We can't rely on just other people keeping us safe. I think as a general public, we need to start sharing that responsibility, and that means that customers at venues have to have their awareness raised about it as well. I want to be in a position with Martin's Law where actually the general public are so keen to have security or to be kept safe that if they are experiencing bad security, they actually a little bit like TripAdvisor, that they actually go somewhere and report it and name and shame the venue if necessary. And I know that sounds a little bit horrible or maybe a bit, I'm not being vindictive about it. It may not sound very nice, but actually, Martin's Law will actually say you need to keep your customers and your staff safe. And if people don't do that, they are actually breaking the law once it becomes legislation. And the general public deserve to be kept safe.
Do you think, obviously Martin's Law must have taken up so much of your time and I dread to think how many hours you must have spent talking to people and thinking about this and dwelling on it. Do you see this as the end, or do you think this is, because we come to complacency again, don't we? Now hope the legislation's coming. Do you see, I guess, what's the next step?
Yeah, it's definitely not the end, because obviously the legislation has a way to go yet to be actually signed off by the King and get that royal assent, and then I think there'll be a period of embedment happening that the government will allow before the law sort of is becoming more forceful, shall we say. But I think there will be a period of embedment. I would anticipate countrywide it'll take maybe 4 or 5 years until people get their head round it properly and accept it, because you know what, people don't do change very easily. Whenever there are big changes, it takes time. And I'll be sticking around then, but yeah, it certainly has turned into a full-time job for me. But it has to be done.
So we've got lots of people in the room today responsible for all sorts of different areas of safety and security. We've got some venue owners in the room, and we've got safety officers and security companies. We've probably even got some police officers in here as well. What can we do? What can we start doing now to get the ball rolling? I
think obviously I do a lot of work on my own, and I feel this is no longer enough. And whilst I continue working and doing what I do and working with the Home Office, I think as an industry, what needs to happen next is that all the different associations that have to do with security, if you all encourage your members to actually get your heads together and maybe urge the government as the different associations to make sure that Martin's Law is as solid as it can be, and that you state what your requirements for your individual industries are, so that the legislation is done right. Because it's not quite the way it needs to be. Okay. We can see faults with it at the moment, but the government is doing what they're doing, but you as an industry know what your needs are. Make those needs known to the government. So you're going to be around a long time, hopefully, to see the implementation. Yes. Is there going to be do you think there's going to be an assessment or a review or anything, just to sort of, how's the compliance piece going to work? Do you know what that looks like? So the government is still working on the compliance and the enforcement regimes. They are still looking at the who's going to be the regulator. I think I have a few ideas who it might be, but I can't speak of it because it's not been confirmed yet. So there are a few open ends still, but I do know the Home Office are working very hard on this. What I do know is that the fines are going to be, obviously there's no point bringing legislation in if it doesn't have teeth, because people will not take it serious enough. So the government has established a 2-tier system for the legislation. The lower tier won't apply for arenas and big venues, because it's up to venues from 100 to 799 people. But the bigger venues, the breaches will be for smaller venues up to 800. The fines will be, I think, a maximum up to £10,000 as a maximum. For the bigger venues, that will either be up to £18 million or 5% of the global intake.
I mean, it's almost a failure, isn't it, if we have to sort of talk about what the consequences are of not doing something. I mean, you know, again, we're in a room of safety professionals, and I'm sure this will be embraced, and we won't need to get to that point. But that's it does show the size of that fine, doesn't it? How seriously then the government are taking this, because those 22 lives need to matter, don't they?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is, what price do you put on a human life? You know, when a family member gets totally ripped out of your life in such a violent manner, when they weren't even necessarily individually targeted, because, you know, terrorists don't care who they kill. They didn't single Martin or Safi or any of the other victims out thinking, I'm going to kill you because of who you are. They just want to kill to make a point, to get a message across to the government. So our loved ones are used, basically killed as a pawn, as a tool, as a just as a point to get across. They don't care about individuals, but what it does to families is it literally rips a hole right in the middle of the family. You know, I have a Martin-shaped hole in my heart for the rest of my life that'll never be mended, you know. So but we're just one family. There's endless families. So these 22 lives that have been lost that day, they have to count for something. I think the biggest message is make sure that those 22 people who lost their lives haven't died for nothing. Make it count, make their lives count. But it isn't just the 22, it is the thousands of young people who were at the concert who have been damaged beyond belief, really, psychologically, some of them physically, but the psychological damage for so many people.